Hey everybody, thanks for coming. We'll get started here in just a minute. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I coming through clear? Nick, you want to do a quick mic check for me? I can't hear anybody.
Mic check 1 2, sir.
Okay, sounds good. Preon, you want to do one too? I can't hear him. I don't know if he's trying to talk or not.
Dang, Twitter Spaces UX, man. He didn't come
Yeah,
off mute though, so I don't think he tried.
he might not be. Sim, are you there? Is your mic muted?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Sim will be on in just a jiffy.
Okay, no problem. We'll wait for him. We'll get started.
Happy Friday, folks.
All the days just blend together for me at this point. I think I've been in crypto too long. I never even know what day it is.
You know that that rings true for the most part, but it's been quite the long week, man. I am very excited for the weekend.
Well, you guys stay busy. I mean, you guys, just the little bit that I see from the outside, just with all the ecosystem projects, and then you guys have been really great about, making introductions and kind of helping everybody along. But it seems like a big operation. You guys have a lot of partners to deal with, and I'm sure a lot of like new projects that have questions about coming to the network. Just seems endless over there.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words, sir. And yeah, I mean, spot on, man. It's definitely no small feat, but we get it done, and we're happy to do it. We're very stoked on just the growth of the network as a whole, right?
Yeah, man. And if things start to turn bullish a little bit, I really have high hopes for Arbitrum. I'm not the first person to say it, but I feel like the last bull run, DeFi was still like on a little bit wobbly legs back in 2020. And I feel like this time around, we really have some pretty unique and innovative projects. And we really have things kind of dialed in to the point where there's a lot for people to do here versus, just the food farms of DeFi summer 2020. And I think that Arbitrum is going to have a big role to play in this next cycle.
Here, sir. We got 2 of those projects on the call today.
Absolutely.
Totally. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hey, Sam, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us here, and yeah, let's get directly started and talk about the meat and potatoes. If you want to start talking about Chronos and you know the leap in technology that we are going to witness on the 17th, and then we can start talking about the synergies after. So you can have the stage first, and then.
Yeah, so essentially, hopefully most of the audience is familiar with Chronos at this point. We're a V33 DEX, and we introduced this concept of maturity adjusted liquidity positions. And so just to give the short rundown, the way that works is you deposit liquidity onto the DEX, and you have the option of staking your LP tokens to earn CHR. And our modified version of the MasterChef contract automatically tracks the amount of time the position has been staked and scales up your rewards proportionally to the amount of time it's been staked. So over time, you actually earn a little emissions boost that right now maxes out at 2x after 6 weeks. But we're actually getting ready to bump that up this coming Monday. We're going to release Chronos V2. And so Chronos V2 has a lot of neat little bells and whistles, some that are kind of under the hood and some that are going to be more user-facing. And so probably the biggest ones for the users are going to be the new maturity contracts that will now max out at a total of 3x after 12 weeks. Really tightening down that incentive to keep your liquidity stationary and to keep it on the DEX for longer to max out that maturity boost. And then the other thing that we're really excited about that we're going to talk about a little bit more later is the introduction of concentrated liquidity. And so we've worked with Dyson, which is the ALM arm of Sphere Finance, to help us develop this. And we think this is going to be a really great managed solution. Unlike the vanilla concentrated liquidity implementation on Uniswap v3, this one is a lot more user-friendly. It doesn't require people to manually rebalance their positions to stay in range all the time. All of that happens automatically behind the scenes. And then the beautiful thing about this is because it's all done at the contract level, there's no need to unstake your position. So you'll still be able to leave your position staked and earn those additional maturity rewards over time. And you'll also, hopefully, be helping to generate significantly more fee revenue for the DEX and for the VCHR voters. But yeah, so, I mentioned Sphere, I mentioned Dyson. This is probably something that I found the most confusing early on, Sim. Would you give us, before we get into talking about Preon, would you explain just what the difference is between Sphere and Dyson and Preon and how these are all intertwined yet separate and how this all works together?
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, the idea that we had initially was that we see a lot of DeFi building on top of each other. I think that is the unique selling point, I would even say, about DeFi is how different Legos can build on top of each other, right? Like you can have an asset being farmed on X protocol, and at the same time it's being utilized in protocol Y, and it's generating yield to the user who subsequently deposits into another protocol, right? And the idea was that each and every protocol that we are building has its own unique use case, and it's covering certain areas within DeFi where we believe the Legos are the most important, right? So let's say yield accrual, right? So we build Dyson. What can we do with naked assets? We have ETH, we have Matic, we have BTC, we have ARB, we have all these blue chips, and users are always seeking for yield. So for us to have such an infrastructure where we can say, hey, you can just come to Dyson and we release either new vaults or create new type of vaults on top of, for instance, concentrated liquidity or single site deposits where you can come and deposit naked ETH, and we strategically deposit based on different weights the collaterals and earn additional yield to the user is already something that is very attractive, for the average, retail user of DeFi. Now, the next thing is everything has a source. So we are like a community-owned infrastructure, right? We haven't been seeking for VC investments, etc., and we have been doing everything from a community. We're all contributors towards the entire Sphere ecosystem, and therefore Sphere, or the ecosystem of Sphere, has subsidiary protocols. Let's say, right? Let's say it's Dyson. We are also building a lending and borrowing platform without any interest, as also our stablecoin Preon that is upcoming, also without any interest. That is also personal beliefs within the team that we don't want to charge interest on the assets or the products that we develop. But in a nutshell, it means simply that we want to cover a lot of the different areas that DeFi provides, and instead of going to, let's say, third parties and build on top of them and have certain fees that you may have to pay, which makes the product as a whole more expensive, right? So if you have, like, let's say, you buy shoes, right, on the open market, you have to pay for the travel costs. Let's say it comes from country X, then goes to country Y. You have to pay for this, for that, right? Until it comes and until you buy it, right? And then you have all these markups that you have to pay for all the different intermediaries that that you have during the process of all of that. So we thought, because of how DeFi works, and how big and educated the team is that we have, we can simply build all the infrastructure that we need for this symbiology that we are trying to achieve in-house, and then we can also considerably lower the fees, right, compared to, let's say, external sources, allow for let's hope the same security. Of course, I don't want to talk bad about others. Let's say we all of us, don't suffer any sort of exploits, hopefully. But essentially, the goal is also that everything has like a quality timestamp as well, right? Saying, okay, this is built by the Sphere team. They have been around for 2 years. Thank God we had never had any sort of exploit or similar. And so people are also drawn to use these products because they know they're like by a battle tested team writing battle tested code, having also battle test auditors writing them down, and they can also enjoy the low fees compared to externals because, simply said, if you work with 10 different teams, everyone needs a piece of the pie. Whilst if you have one entire ecosystem, you can like cut down the cost fraction that you would have to pay to the external teams because it's all internal. Yeah. Long story short, it's cheaper.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, just to break that down a little bit, what you're saying, the goal of DeFi and really the promise of DeFi is to disintermediate, these financial services. And by taking out the middlemen and taking out, the little fee that each middleman extracts, you're able to democratize these services and make them, work for a lot more people for a lot lower cost.
Totally.
And so what you're saying is taking this even to the next level. By building each of the individual Lego blocks yourself, you're able to cut down on these fees even further. And then on top of this, when people participate in the DeFi suite of services, what also comes along with this is the confidence in knowing that they're dealing with trusted developers, with a trusted protocol, somebody that's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Because with the greater DeFi ecosystem, if there is one unscrupulous actor anywhere in the chain, or if there's one point of weakness that results in an exploit, it can break that entire chain. And so this is almost like the centralization of decentralization, but for a positive effect for the end user.
Totally. And the idea, of course, the grand goal is to say everything that we built is decentralized, right? So that there is no certain controls by the team, right? But at the same time, like you said, centralization in a sense that you would rather flock to the protocols that that are, have, been battle tested, right? So it's not in a sense centralized that you cannot do something else, but in a way centralized that you like to, centralize yourself around these protocols, right? So, but yeah, very good. The way you have actually, talked about this, yeah, I would say it's really spot on. Saying, hey, why would you bother? I don't know, using another protocol because it just has short-term high yields and you may get rugged. While okay, this protocol it's already cheaper to the counterparty, more battle tested, right? And I don't need to worry, right? So users that don't have a high risk appetite over a certain period of time would be more inclined to use the ecosystem rather than just going and chasing farm after farm. Will be able to have like a safe safe haven, like Uniswap is today, or Aave, or by now also GMX, for instance, right? Where people are like, yeah, I can use these protocols because I know they have certain safety scores that I have internally saying, okay, if they have like a 9 out of 10, then I will use them. And, after a certain period of time, it goes up, right? Time is also a factor. And then, of course, also, costs and so on and so forth. And we try to, excel in all of them. And yeah, so far so good, thank God.
Yeah, and I've been using Dyson for a while. Dyson built SPCHR, which is the liquid wrapper for VCHR, and right now it's the largest, most stable, and most popular by a long shot. And then you guys through Dyson also do, like you said, the things like auto compounding pools or single asset vaults that automatically generate yield.
Yeah.
And so, this is a business model that I think is really attractive both to like newcomers and to DeFi veterans alike. For newcomers, it reduces sort of the barrier of entry to DeFi. You just supply the asset, you earn the yield, pay the fee, set and forget. And then for people like me who've been doing this for a while, I get to the point where like, man, I get tired of clicking buttons all the time.
Totally.
And so it's just a lot easier for me to be able to just put something somewhere and forget about it.
Totally.
And this is somewhere, maybe Nick can speak on this. Like, this is to me the thing that really sets Arbitrum apart from a lot of other chains. Is I've seen like a big focus. There are a lot of Arbitrum protocols that seem specifically designed to abstract the complexity of DeFi away from the end user. And I think that what you result in is an ecosystem that is a lot more akin to something like the way traditional finance works, where the user is not required to directly manage their assets themselves, but that they use like a trusted counterparty with depositing assets and letting them do that for them. And everybody seems to do it a little bit different way. I think that you have Plutus DAO doing it one way, you have Redacted Cartel doing it another way. You have all the functionality that's been built on top of something like GLP. I don't really have a question about this, but is there anything you'd like to kind of comment on that about?
Yeah,
Nick?
for sure, man. I mean, you basically hit it spot on, right? Like, Arbitrum wasn't always like this, right? It was the network wasn't always as frothy, attracting all of these very smart folks, including all of you two folks. But what's really important to recognize is that like the base layer protocols, right, that have kind of had their footing here on the network for quite some time, that did provide kind of novel or iterative ways to produce yield in a various amount of ways, right? And with that, came iterations of those base protocols, so on and so forth, right? And then from that, you had folks come along and say like, hey, I could actually simplify this for the end user, to your point, right? And start coming out with these types of structured products, various different financial tools, etc., right? And it's really great to see, because I personally believe, right, like I think the UX of crypto, of on-chain activities does need to improve, right? If we were going to onboard the next couple 100 million users in that sense. And on Arbitrum, you're really kind of seeing that thesis play out in the sense of there are a multitude of venues in which you produce like actual like quote unquote real yield, right? And in saying that, right, you have a multitude of protocols building on top of the various different types of yield sources, and seeing that is fantastic. I know I do expect that to just accelerate as as the years pass on, especially on the Arbitrum network, just because of the vibrant kind of DeFi ecosystem that we've all built thus far.
Yeah, certainly, and that's kind of brings me into this next product that Sphere is launching, this Preon Finance. And so this is sort of the next contender in an arena that sort of got started, I think, by Liquidity with LUSD, and is now just been entered by Ethos Reserve. But this idea of interest-free, over-collateralized stablecoin loans that use crypto native assets, and then just due to by supplying yield incentives, attempt to get a grip into the network a little bit. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Preon and kind of talk about how its CDP model works and what kind of sets it apart from these other CDP stablecoin offerings, and what users can expect from this once this launches.
Totally. So essentially, Preon is also, as you have said, an interest-free stablecoin. To be fair, it's forked off of Liquidity with a lot of different changes. We have introduced something new called binary gauges. Essentially, you can imagine that the biggest problem with a stablecoin like Liquidity is the overpeg, and the reasoning for the overpeg is that the stablecoin, most of the liquidity, if you were to look on-chain, is actually within the stability pool, right? Which is good for liquidations because you also get the assets at a discount. But the worst part is that you cannot really, buy the stablecoin on the open market because it's intended to stay at $1, right? So the only reason why you would get LUSD then is to, mint it and then sell it on the open market, right? The problem with that is if the peg doesn't really go down, then you would need to buy it back at a premium, for instance, to close down or to shut or to close your position, right? So that was like this problem with Liquidity's overpeg scenario that we have been looking at and how we can fix that. And of course, everything is an experiment, and I think Preon is the next iteration in that line of experiments with how we have been building our stablecoin modules and how we have been working on getting a more stable peg and more incentives for people to come and mint and redeem the stablecoin, and therefore also generate this internal inflow of minting and unminting. But let me first talk about the collaterals, and then I can actually go towards the gauges, because, like I said, a lot of things to unwrap here. But with the stablecoin, we are not only taking naked ETH as collateral, right? The goal is to take many productive assets as collaterals and actually create a sort of incentive model for this. Let me give an example here. Is that we've been very closely working with the teams over at Balancer and Aura, right? We have been working for literally the first CDP, the interest-free CDP that is actually taking BPT's Balancer pool tokens as collateral within our stablecoin, right? This enables massive opportunities for users who are actually using Balancer to enjoy yield on their LSD products, right? They have the composable stable pools or the booster pools where people provide, let's say, ETH and STETH or wrapped STETH on Arbitrum rather. And part of that liquidity also goes into Aave and is earning interest there, and pays back part of the emissions that Balancer pays towards the LPs. And therefore, you can actually take these LPs and at the same time collateralize it against a stable coin, and then go and do other endeavors that you wouldn't be able to do because if there is no way to collateralize your BPTs, your capital is kind of stuck in Balancer earning that specific yield, right? But now with our model, we can actually say, hey, come over, you can come with your BPTs. Let's say you deposit them into Dice and they're starting to auto compound. Therefore, the BAL yield, the Aura yield, etc., are actually being compounded back into more ETH and our ETH, let's say in this case, and you have multiple benefits from that. Let's say ETH and our ETH stay stagnant at $100, and you earn 10% yield, right? For argument's sake, we say you can go, for every dollar you deposit, you get like 90 cents, right, of STAR. Now, after a year, you earn 10% yield, so it's like $10. And let's say ETH and our ETH literally were a stable coin for that entire year, and they still are $1 after, when the year ends. Therefore, you earn 10% yield, and on that 10% yield, you can actually take you can actually increase your loan and take another $9 for the $10 of yield that you have earned. Therefore, your yield also, you're auto compounding, you're earning more yield on your collateral, but not only that, you're also actually growing your position, which in theory then also allows you to have amplified exposure by minting more of our stablecoin, right? At the same time, we're working on multiple bribing mechanisms. So, for example, on Chronos, we see, hey, the yields are good. For every dollar that we bribe, we receive more than $1 in emissions. From these auto compounding scenarios where, users can deposit into Dyson and then take the receipt token of Dyson and actually collateralize it on Preon, we can take part of the performance fees that we set to actually redirect into bribing a certain Star USDC pool, for instance, right? And then users can actually also farm on other venues with our stablecoin and additional yields, while also their naked assets are being productive within Preon itself, right? Normally, you have protocols that take single site deposits, and then you withdraw the stable and do whatever you want with it. But at this with this additional level of composability, you're actually you can deposit into multiple different protocols and have the exposure to these protocols, the yields to these protocols, whilst also having our stablecoin. And you can sell it in the open market, or you can participate in yield farming opportunities with our stablecoin as well. Hope that was clear for the collateral part. Do you have any questions, or should I go over to the gauges system?
Here we go. I'll be honest with you guys. The first time Sim explained this to me, I had to book another call with him to get another explanation.
Well, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and it just, when you get into the docs and everything and how the Preon token plays into it, it just gets more and more complex. But my understanding of it is essentially that the users can deposit their collateral, and these can either be token deposits or they can use something like a yield producing LP.
Yes.
And they can use that as collateral, and then the yield that LP that they have deposited is earning can then be used to essentially increase their collateralization limit over time, because the value of their collateral is increasing. Is that kind of the easy way to put it?
The easy way. And even if the collateral stays stagnant from a price perspective, the additional yield will lower your liquidation risks, or you can even mint more stablecoins based on that yield that you're earning, right?
Now, I have another question about the way these collateral deposits are used. So is the plan eventually to use the deposited collateral in other yield-bearing strategies to return more value to users?
Yeah.
Or is the collateral essentially stagnant from the time the user deposits?
Thanks for asking that very nice question. So we have been working on, like I said, we have Dyson and Preon now coming live very soon. Preon, let's say Preon has been on testnet already, and I have seen a few people already finding the contract and reading through it. But Preon is really, really close on the horizon. And the idea is that the collateral that comes into Preon, a certain ratio of that goes into Dyson, and then Dyson is actually yield farming these on different strategies, right? Battle tested strategy is nothing that is insanely complex on battle tested things, as such that we don't have the risk of relying on counterparties too much. And the innovation in our vaults is that we don't have to necessarily put all our eggs in one basket, but our smart vaults work the way initially it has been architectured by the Teto team, which we have inherited within our platform. It was used by something that we have touted as quantum liquidity, where the liquidity is within a liquidity pool, but at the same time farming somewhere else at a certain ratio, right? So 70% is in the liquidity pool and 30% is somewhere else farming. And that's what we're doing within Dyson, is that users deposit their collateral via Preon and depositing it from Preon as proxy into Dyson, and then Dyson farms it into different strategies. So we are building another DeFi Lego that is called Sphere Lend, and it's interest-free lending and borrowing against other assets, right? So we will have different avenues, let's say Aave or Sphere Lend, where the deposits, the collateral will be deposited and people can, borrow against these positions, which earns additional yield, which goes back to VE Preon lockers, right? So if you have locked your Preon into the platform, you're going to be eligible for all these different revenue streams that the entire platform generates. Plus, of course, part of that also is then being auto-compounded for the user, as I have said, with the BPTs to earn, to increase your loan-to-value ratio, or that you can mint more of Star and use it somewhere else.
Okay, because this was a question that came up today in the Chronos Discord server.
Yeah.
Somebody was kind of decrying the added risk of having the collateral that is backing the stablecoin being deployed into the greater ecosystem.
I agree.
My understanding of this is it's very similar again to what Ethos Reserve is doing.
Yeah.
And it's not too dissimilar from what like Beethoven Finance did with their boosted pools, or what Granary is doing with the Nitro pools. And so you're essentially just mitigating risk by using not 100% of the collateral, smaller amounts of collateral, and then eventually these will be deployed probably into an in-house lending and borrowing market that will be relatively bulletproof. So there is a little added risk, but you're not just willy-nilly going for 10,000% APRs in every shitcoin farm you can get your hands on.
Yeah, it's not going to be some, the goal is to look at contracts that are immutable. So let's say Aave, or something that is within the ecosystem that is like, secured with, let's say, time locks and multi-sigs, and not even like external teams. But like I said, we're building an entire ecosystem, right? Everything is working together. And, if you deposit into one platform, you're also, going to be able to utilize under the hood the other platforms that we are building within the ecosystem. So it is like I said, stuff like really that has been like battle tested now for 3-4 years, like Aave, right? Or Sphereland that is upcoming, that is being built by us, that will also go through extensive auditing before we even start that. And even then we will not do risky stuff, but it would be purely vanilla, right? We don't want to go for the 10,000% stuff, but rather have safe yield than risky yield, right? So the yield farm opportunities, the goal is to always have more backing sitting idle. So let's say we are always at 100% backing, and the excess collateral that we would have possibly is the thing that we farm yield on for the user, or on the user's behalf.
Yeah, and one man's added risk is another man's capital efficiency.
Exactly.
And so I think this gets back to, if people trust the Sphere team and trust, the Sphere ecosystem, there may be a little bit of added perceived risk, but this is not that much different. When you put your money into a TradFi bank, that money does not sit in the vault. It's deployed for other yield generating opportunities in a way that's, ostensibly safe and can be recalled when needed. So I think this is really probably something we're going to start seeing a lot more of. But yeah, everybody do your own research and, make sure you're operating within your own risk tolerance before making any big financial decisions.
One more thing I would like to add to this is that the goal is, or with the ethos that we are, it's funny, Ethos Reserve and but the ethos that we have within our team is to build the infrastructure as such that you don't even need to trust the team, but have it all run extensively by itself, right? So we have been building the protocol, and it's going to be in a beta phase for a certain period of time, where we still have certain control over the platform, but we want to mitigate that in the future by having enforceable on-chain voting or governance, which then has the rights over certain parameters. As such, the team cannot really go rogue on the platform or on the users. So the idea is to, of course, we appreciate everyone trusting the team, but the goal is that you don't even have to trust us once the ecosystem matures to a certain extent, where we can say, okay, now we can leave the controls within the community, and we are also part of the community, of course. But that is like the is that called opus maximum? But essentially, it is like the standard that we are looking for. There will be we cannot go like 100% immutable, for instance, like liquidity, because for Preon we plan to have multiple different collaterals. Which if it's completely immutable, we cannot add new collateral types, right? So we plan to have stuff like that being done behind a multi-sig, and only when let's say all the majority of VE Preon lockers vote in favor for that collateral, then there will be an on-chain execution that only then allows for that collateral to be added, and not arbitrarily by the team. Of course, we will set initial parameters, but That is like the grand goal, saying, hey, the lockers, or the ones who hold the tokens of the platform will be able to decide what happens with the protocol as a whole. Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting to me about having these multiple collateral types too is that, a couple months ago when USDC depegged, I think the general crypto population started to understand the necessity to move away from these centralized backed stablecoins. And then now with the multi-chain issues that Phantom is experiencing, and they don't have their own native stablecoin, it's a real mess over there.
Yeah.
And so Arbitrum also lacks its own, official quote unquote native stablecoin, but something like this that has the potential to collateralize assets from all over the Arbitrum ecosystem and essentially, tie the entire network together in this way, in that, all or many of the core protocols are being collateralized to mint the stablecoin, I think really has the potential to make this something that could be really great for the network as a whole.
I totally agree. The idea, the goal that we have with Preon, we started with BPTs, for instance, because of the LSD-Fi trend, right? Everyone likes LSDs. Obviously, you can stake ETH and 3-4% yield on an asset that is also at the same time deflationary, right? Which is like amazing for the majority of DeFi. So the goal was, okay, how can we not only take these single site assets, but on the same time also take assets that are, so to speak, productive, right? As you have said that. So we start with Balancer, but what I can say before we even launch is that there's a few other protocols that we have been in touch with to take their, let's say, LSDDs, right? Like liquid staking derivatives, right? Where that's what I would like to call it, right? Is like you have that already, but you are adding like an additional wrapper around it, right? We have seen that with like Pendor, with Balancer, and a few more, or like let's say Trader Joe with their LPs, right? And the goal is naturally to have all protocols that have sort of LSD offerings to come and say, hey, you can use our platform, but if you still need capital and do something else, right, you can just go and not need to sell your assets, but instead mint Star and then do whatever you want, right? Because you can sell Star. It's a good stable coin. It's hopefully at peg all the time. Of course, we have seen stuff like LUSD and the DPEG that you have mentioned, where even a stablecoin like LUSD depegged, which is 100% collateralized by ETH, right? More than 100%, but it's like for every dollar out there in LUSD, there's at least one in ETH backing it, right? And even that one depegged. So, Mania sometimes depegs even the strongest things, but obviously LUSD when came back to peg, rather, almost instantly, right? But that is the goal, to have these assets as decentralized as possible, and backing Star. So we don't plan to take assets in case you already may think, hey, I have an ETH USDC pool. We're not going to take stuff like USDC. It's backing for the stablecoin. Initially, it will be ETH and its different variations. The big goal is also to have stuff like ARB also as collateral. We have seen with the delegation system, and we plan to have something where you can deposit your ARB, earn yield on your ARB, and at the same time do something else during that. But I mean, for that we need a few things from the ARB token. We have seen, I believe some news that said that ARB can be staked in the future for I believe the sequencer fees. So you can imagine that you can come to us. We build a liquid solution where we stake it on your behalf. We compound, for instance, the ETH into more ARB, and then you can mint more stable coins with things like that. So that is like the composability that we are talking about here. It's not just single site deposits of the LSDs, which is already amazing, but instead, if you use another platform to earn additional yield, then you can come to Preon and mint a stable coin, which is very, very cheap to mint, and then do whatever else you want with it, right? So the goal is that the entire Arbitrum ecosystem to come and use ours as a way to earn yield without selling their assets and then do whatever else they want. And then they can come back if they, let's say, have another LSD play and then come back, collateralize it on Preon and then take again Star and do something else again, right? And we want to be the central focal stablecoin on Arbitrum with 100% support of the entire ecosystem.
Well, Nick, I got to think that makes you sound happy. Just from what I know of the Arbitrum Foundation's goals, it sounds like this is right in line with, fostering cooperation among protocols and, potentially of having something akin to an Arbitrum native stablecoin. I don't know, what your thoughts are on the latest, upset with multi-chain and all of that, but it seems like, Arbitrum right now has a lot of stable coins, but it doesn't seem like it has one really dominant one. And I think that would be something that could potentially really be beneficial for the whole ecosystem.
I totally agree. I believe wholeheartedly. I think Nick wants to give his inputs on that. But I see Preon in the future dominating this lack of a native dominant stablecoin. There have been stablecoins on Arbitrum, but I believe we're adding an additional extra flavor that hasn't been, I would say, on the ecosystem so far.
Here, sir. Yeah, man. The whole multi-chain situation is incredibly not only horrible, but also sad. So if anybody is getting affected by that, I do apologize. But in regards to just stable coins, right, in general, we have centralized ones. We've tried algorithmic ones in the past, over collateralized ones. Definitely seeing some movement in the whole like LSD-backed stablecoin space, RWA-backed stablecoin space, etc. Right? And truly, I think optionality is very important for the end user, right? Not only for the end user, but also for the developer who may or may not be developing with said stablecoin. And in regards to optionality, right? A user should be able to choose if they want to go with a centralized stablecoin such as USDC or Tether, right? And or a decentralized-esque type solution, right? And I think that's very important, not only for the overall growth of an ecosystem, but also to really push. I think while we're all here, right, our ethos of decentralizing some of the not only financial stuff we work with, but the technology as well. And in regards to Arbitrum, right, one thing I will disclaimer is we have a canonical bridge on Arbitrum, one of the largest ETH bridges in existence, and so if you did want to use a canonical bridge versus a third party, right, you very well can do that on the Arbitrum network. But yeah, in saying that, right, like we have a bunch of stables on the network currently. To your point, USDC does kind of lead that charge at moment. But I'm very excited to see the type of different, stablecoin solutions that will be proliferating onto the network, et cetera, just kind of making this flywheel go, even faster in that sense. And just seeing the type of products that either, it is integrated with or built upon.
Yeah, so speaking of the flywheel, that kind of gets us into Preon is going to be working closely with Chronos at launch, and we're probably going to end up being the liquidity hub for Star, once you guys launch. So do you want to talk a little bit, Sim, about what your plans are for, gaining adoption and incentivization, and, how Chronos is going to play into that?
Totally. So essentially, we have been working very closely over the past few months, and thank you, first of all, to the team. You've been amazing to work with. The idea that we have, of course, is to start building a liquid hub for Chronos with our Star stablecoin, effectively having a liquidity sim within Chronos. That means that we plan to incentivize the liquidity for Star there with our NFT holdings, potential bribing in a sense where where you bribe $1 and get more than $1 in incentives. As such, users can come and use the DEX also for swapping Star back and forth, which also of course adds revenue also to Chronos, which then can or is going to be used to incentivize the liquidity further, which should then bootstrap even more incentives to Star, which then also translate into more, people flocking over on using Chronos as a DEX and swap back and forth on Chronos. Also, of course, with the introduction of concentrated liquidity, stuff like enforcing a stablecoin peg is going to be really more cost effective than on other DEX solutions. So one can use Chronos and add more things like virtual liquidity depth, which we are actually going to be showcasing with our upcoming analytics page for Dyson, where you can see, for example, how much fees came through our vaults, how much fees have users receive, what is the impermanent loss over a certain period of time, and therefore, we can work on the concentrated liquidity model, and strengthen the peg of Star, increase the virtual depth liquidity that we're gonna aim and strive for, and therefore, of course, Chronos will be attracting way more volume to its own pools, which will of course also be managed by Dyson. And not only that, the fees that are generated will be incentivizing users to vote for our pairs and attract even more liquidity, which of course helps Chronos grow in volume and TVL, and as such also grow the volume and TVL of Preon and Dyson, and therefore mutually supporting each other in that aspect.
Yeah, so like you said, we started working with you guys. Sphere was a launch partner and launched SBCHR. And then since then, we've just found a really good working relationship between the two teams, and just we get along really well. And then Sphere has always shown a lot of enthusiasm towards, building applications on top of Chronos. So for anybody that doesn't know, on Monday, Chronos is rolling out our concentrated liquidity solution, and that's actually been built for us by Dyson. And so this is going to be a managed solution. If you're familiar with the way Gamma Strategies works on Thena, it's closer to that, where the user is not going to be required to manually, rebalance their position within ranges all the time. And so it should cut down on, people being out of range and not earning any fees. What we found when we looked at the vanilla implementation of concentrated liquidity on Uniswap v3 was that you had a small number of very skilled, very active liquidity managers that were constantly keeping their position within the optimal range and were earning an outsized portion of the fees. And they were vastly more profitable than they were on Uniswap v2. But for people that either weren't quite as skilled or weren't quite as, on top of things and weren't constantly rebalancing their position, it actually turned out that the vast majority of liquidity providers were net negative. Were actually losing money to impermanent loss because their position would go out of range and they wouldn't be earning any fees to compensate. And so when we started looking for solutions to implement concentrated liquidity on Chronos, it was really important to us that we had a little bit more user-friendly solution. And we also needed to make it so that, you weren't constantly required to unstake your position, because doing so would lose your maturity boost. And so Dyson's solution is really perfect for us. You deposit your liquidity, it automatically determines, the optimal range based on the volatility of the pair, and then it constantly at the contract level moves your range so that it's constantly in position and always earning fees. And so while this might not be as profitable for the, the upper echelon of liquidity managers, it will be more profitable for the vast majority of users. And this is really important in the v3.3 model too, because as you know, liquidity providers are not the ones earning the fees. The fees are actually going to the voters. And so we wanted a solution that was going to make it easy for liquidity providers to be able to provide liquidity, set and forget it, without getting wrecked by impermanent loss and directing, all their fees elsewhere. And so we're pretty confident that this is going to be a really popular solution. It's going to be easy to pick up and understand from day one. And, we're stoked to be working with Dyson on this too. And so, and then as we introduce the new maturity contracts, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're excited for all the things that are we're likely going to collaborate on in the future. I know a lot of ideas have been tossed around in our private discussions, but we love working with you guys, and we look forward to working with you for a long time. And we think there's still like a lot of cool stuff that we can build together. So thanks for being fun to work with.
I can only give it back. Appreciate it. I actually wanted to speak a bit more in depth from a perspective from, a Chronos perspective and a fee perspective, right? I cannot speak about yields, but you will be able to actually check our vaults and how they've been performing by looking up on different analytical pages on how what the current APRs are, etc., etc. We are not gonna be able to speak about that here. In case you're interested, we have built our vaults in such a way that normal analytical pages can actually integrate us. I know that a lot of ALMs use their custom ways of creating vaults, and therefore they don't have the analytical quote-unquote prowess that we have with the solution that we have had in mind. So you can actually check out our strategies onto different analytical pages and see, okay, how well has it been faring. On another note that I wanted to add to this is that, of course, the trading fees within Dyson, or the trading fees that we are generating within these pools, are actually going to be bribing the VECHR lockers, which means that you will be compensated for the impermanent loss in form of CHR. And therefore, if we look at how historical bribing was working, is that for every dollar that you bribe, you also receive more than $1 in emissions that get emitted towards you as you deposit it into the gauges. And therefore, even if, let's say, you cannot always win, right? Like, our votes are not going to be guaranteed to always outperform impermanent loss, especially when there's days where, let's say, ETH pumps against USDC 20-30%. There's no trading fees that can compensate that amount of, except if you have like huge volume, right? So there will be days where you may be outperformed by if you just held, right? It's like trading where you lose and you win. But the benefit and the beauty of VE33 is, like I said, if for every dollar in bribes, ideally you receive more than $1 in emissions, and these more than $1 in emissions could be then back again the tipping point of saying, yeah, I would have lost today, but the emissions set me above that loss threshold that you would have encountered otherwise, right? So that is also a very beautiful part of how all of this works, is that you receive CHR, you have an ERC20, that means additional composability other platforms can build on top, saying, hey, we're taking these dice and receipt tokens as collateral, and then I'm not gonna call I'm not gonna mention another stablecoin here. I think we talked already enough, but essentially you can have a stablecoin take these Dyson receipt tokens as collateral, and then you can increase the exposure. If you have, for instance, long ETH, you can have a, let's say, wrapped ST ETH Dyson concentrated liquidity pool, and then you can actually take that and deposit it into a certain stablecoin and mint your own, mint a stablecoin, and then long, let's say, ETH, right, with that endeavor. So it adds an additional layer of capital efficiency to the entire DEX, and of course, the more volume there is, the more attractive also the pools become, and the more attractive they become, the more they're going to be incentivized, and that is like the beauty of the flywheel. Also, another thing that I have seen so far privately is that there's additional efficiency within the Chronos V3 implementation over let's say vanilla Uni v3, which should theoretically translate into even more volume going through Chronos, which means even more incentives to the lockers, which means more yield going to the lockers.
Yeah, we're excited about it. It's probably been the single biggest request from users since we launched. And there's a lot of service providers out there that have a lot of ideas on the way to do concentrated liquidity. And so we really, we spent a long time making the decision, and it just worked out that this seems like it's going to be the best fit for us. So we're going to find out starting pretty soon. We're looking to launch it on this Monday, on the 17th.
Totally.
So
one more thing that I wanted to add to how we actually do concentrated liquidity management is, of course, we have the different ranges based on historical data. We are back testing our ranges before we push them on chain. Another benefit that we have, I would say, is that we do off-chain calculation and computation of certain ranges, and then we push it on-chain. Plus, when we rebalance the pools, we don't rebalance against the own pool. Normally, a lot of, let's say, traditional ALMs withdraw liquidity from the LP. Let's say you are 50% of the LP, then the LP shrinks during the rebalance by 50%, and then they sell one asset for the other, amplifying slippage, which we sort of mitigate by actually using 1inch to swap the assets off chain, first of all, and then have them in the preferred ranges, and then set them back into the liquidity, ensuring that we don't have slippage, or not having no slippage, but mitigated slippage compared to legacy solutions. So that also allows for us to have our liquidity, the majority of the liquidity, also always being used, and not be inactive, because other ALMs also take part of the liquidity, keep them in a certain different range, while we always try and utilize 100% of the liquidity within the range, and therefore increasing the fees that we can generate within the pool.
that's really interesting. I want to stick on that for just a second. So what you're saying is that, when the pool needs to be rebalanced, rather than just pouring in a single asset, into the side that's gotten lower, what you actually do is you make the swap automatically through 1inch, and then redeposit the assets in the proper balance to fit into the new range. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's super cool. I didn't even know that.
Appreciate it. Yeah, this way you have active liquidity all the time, right? Like I said, you have two options. You swap against an illiquid pool if you're the majority of the pool, which we technically would be if we are going to be the primary ALM on Chronos, for instance. But that also happens with Uniswap, right? Where if you become big enough, then swapping against the own pool becomes too expensive, not in a gas way, but actually paying slippage fees, right? Plus, if you do it something like, we have so much excess and we put it in a different range, let's say a single tick range, so that, we sell it, you also, you are exposed to additional and permanent loss from that additional range that you're having, which is not going to be the most ideal range anyway, but also have the problem of not having all the liquidity being used to earn the active yield that you technically strive for by using an ALM, right? So I would say, managed to tackle both these problems by saying, hey, we swap most of the liquidity off-chain, compute everything off-chain, meaning that even if you try to front-run us, we have front-running protection and within the swap, and then readjust the balances. I believe in Arbitrum there is no real big MEV problems anyway, which is cool, but as additional measure that we have implemented. So therefore, I would say a lot of cool features, to say the least.
Another question I have, for anybody that's used Theta, the way that Gamma's manager works is they essentially use always narrow liquidity bands and wide liquidity bands. And so I know that with your strategy, protocols have the option of doing narrow and wide bands, but they can also just do like a single band concentrated liquidity pool. And so in what instances would it be beneficial for the protocols to set up narrow and wide pools versus just using the medium solution?
Very good question. Essentially, what we are building next is going to be a multi-weight pool or strategy, where you can actually have both of them inside of it. Like, you can have wide and narrow based on different weights in 1 volt. So platforms can actually come and say, hey, we want to have a narrow band and a wide band, right, to these percentages. So 10% is wide, 10% for instance is narrow, to increase the fees or trading fees or make it less slippery, right? Because if the more narrow the pools, the more the virtual depth is compared to Uniswap v2. Just a small explainer of virtual depth, it's, for example, that when you deposit $10,000 of, let's say, USDC, USDT, but the more narrow the pool or the ranges become, the more deep it becomes, in a way. It's like you have 2 cups, right? One really wide cup and it's smaller, or one very, thin cup, sorry, English, but it's very long, right? And then you have the virtual depth of that liquidity that is much deeper, right, within that certain range. So there will be protocols that are going to be interested in having a wider range and a more narrow range at the same time. For instance, a wider range also makes it harder to manipulate the price on Uniswap v3, but a narrow range makes the swapping experience less, costly for the swapper. And that is like the next iteration of innovation that we are building within our vaults. But the initial, let's say, quote unquote, legacy vaults that we are going to be introducing are going to be decided by the factor of the team, of course, with our suggestions. We will be talking to the different protocols that are going to want ALM solutions, and then we can sit down and see, based on their need, do a tailored vault solution for them. There's no such thing as one vault solution that rules them all, but more based on different whatever the token is doing. Is if it's a stable coin that you want to have stable coin ranges, which vary way differently to, let's say, a wrapped ETH GMX vault, right, where you can actually look it up, where ETH and GMX are sort of correlating now. Before it was GMX going up against ETH, then it trending a bit down against ETH. So there will always be needed some back testing before you can say, okay, we're going to be doing a strategy for you.
Yeah, what's good about this is it's like you get to have your cake and eat it too, because this will be something that, again, the user or the liquidity provider isn't going to need to make the decision. They'll just need to make the decision on which pool, which tokens they want to provide liquidity for. And then on the back end, it'll be determined sort of what the optimal solution will be. And so I think that, the more you can reduce that PvP element, and the more, even having to choose between narrow and wide range bands adds a little bit more of a head scratching for the average user. And so this should, really be very simple for the average person to pick up and understand, provide their liquidity, enjoy their maturity boost, and leave their liquidity so it remains sticky for a long time, which is, of course, perfectly in line with Chronos's kind of core design principles. So I've actually learned a lot about this concentrated liquidity today. I'm excited to hear all about this and hear about what's coming. So we're just over the hour mark now, Sim. I don't know if there's anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about, or if Nick has anything that he wanted to comment on. I'd open up the floor to questions at this time. And, if there's anything else anybody wants to talk about in the meantime that we forgot to go over, now's a good time to do that.
I'm good on my side, fellas. It was an outstanding conversation as always. Very in depth. Learned a lot already, and I'm very excited for the launch. Super stoked on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation as well. Always nice to speak to individuals as yourselves. It's always a pleasure. And I think we should hop over to the questions if users or listeners have questions here, and then we can wrap this up. I think also an hour of in-depth geeky talks may, not be as interesting for users at a certain point.
One thing I'll mention too, we're going to do a little promotion for anybody that's listened to this whole thing. If you want to do a recap thread about this AMA on Twitter, do a little thread and then use the hashtag Chronos AMA. And then sometime in the next 24 hours or so, I'll take a look at all of those, and we'll send $100 to whoever we think has the best one.
Oh, amazing.
$100 on a Friday, man, get you dinner and drinks.
I'm gonna start writing threads, I guess. What did I say?
I tell you what, man, Threaders are going to make big money. Elon's sending everybody money on Twitter these days.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We were going to give away $100 for the best question too, but nobody has a question, so we're not going to give that $100 away. Maybe we'll pick our top 2 favorite threads.
Amazing.
All right, guys. Yeah. So if anybody wants to do a recap of this AMA, make a Twitter thread, use the hashtag Chronos AMA, and that's how we'll search for it. And then in the next 24 hours or so, we'll pick a couple of our favorites and we'll send you a few bucks. If there's nothing else, this was a great talk, Sim. It's always a pleasure. Really looking forward to everything that's going to happen with Preon. Nick, always a pleasure as well. Love being on Arbitrum. Love working with you guys. So I think we'll wrap it up there for today, unless anybody has anything else to say.
No, that's perfect. One small shill. Anybody looking to build an Arbitrum? DM's open, lads. Let's hear it.
Appreciate it. Everyone who wants to build on top of the Sphere ecosystem, ping Lilo.
Anybody that wants to do anything on Chronos, I guess ping me.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Appreciate y'all. Have a good start into the weekend, and see you soon on Monday for the launch.
Cheers, everyone.
All right.
All right, everyone.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.